Well, welcome to the AI and Biotech Initiative. This is our first year running this series of events. So we're running several online workshops like this one on data management and regulatory compliance. So besides the online virtual workshops, we also have several in-person networking events. We'll also put the link into the chat if you're interested in learning more about generally the series of events. And also, we will also have the link to the next event coming up on the 24th. And that will be a spotlight talk about AI-driven lab automation. When will it happen and what are the risks involved? So very briefly, for our panelists, just quickly, I wanted to say that our intended audience for this series of events are primarily academic trainees who may or may not be considering starting their own companies in the future in biotech. So I suppose a lot of terms and jargons that are perhaps very familiar to folks already in the industry might not be familiar to people who are academic life sciences trainees. So yeah, let's get started. But I suppose I should introduce myself before we get started. My name is Hui Sin, and I am going to be facilitating and moderating this panel. And I'm currently a fifth-year PhD student in UC San Diego, although currently I'm based in London as a visiting researcher at University College London. So the first thing I do to get started is really I'd like to invite you all to introduce yourselves and your company. So perhaps we can start with Alex.
Hey, I'm Alex. I've created Scampy a long time ago, and then worked for Celerity, helped build Celerity's compute platform, and started Lemon almost 2 years ago. Right, and we're building an open source API first data platform for biology.
You want to popcorn to someone to get started?
Sorry?
Oh, you want to popcorn to someone to get started?
Oh, Bogdan.
Sure.
Wow.
I'm Bogdan. I'm Bogdan, co-founder, CEO of Kaleidoscope. I was a scientist working in genomics and preclinical target discovery. Struggled a lot with the lack of software for managing those projects, especially when there's different people and teams involved. And so co-founded Kaleidoscope with two good friends and former colleagues from design and engineering backgrounds, really with the idea of building software for biotechs to be able to track and communicate the things that are most like mission critical to their R&D projects. So I'm sure we'll have more time to get into that later, but Nicholas, if you want to do your intro.
Sure, I'm Nicholas. I'm the CEO and founder of Sphinx. I spent several years building internal tools and platforms at Benevolent AI and AI.bio, a couple of kind of modern tech bio companies. And when I was there, I'd say got frustrated with the lack of effective tooling for scientists to analyze and share their data. And so what we built at Sphinx is a collaborative data platform for scientists to analyze their assay data and share those results. And so we're trying to replace the typical flow of, get data in Excel, do some transformations, make plots in Prism, copy and paste it into PowerPoint, and share that as the kind of like final artifact of science.
Thanks, everyone. It does sound like the founding of your companies really stem from frustration with existing tools and solutions that are failing scientists in many ways. So I'd like to actually get deeper into the question of how is your solution uniquely poised to solve the problem that you had just shared. So that's part one of the question. Perhaps relatedly, what are the costs and disadvantages of the existing solutions? As you all have brought up, and I guess I'd like to hear more about them. Nicholas, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think one big difference, which is maybe sounds simple, is like we built this as like a cloud first platform with collaboration in mind. And so, you know, typically the workflow that we see is scientists working on their own laptop on an Excel sheet, right? Or maybe throwing them into a shared Google Drive somewhere. And the problems with that are it's hard to find that data later, right? It's hard to kind of look at the same data and you know, reproduce that analysis. I think we're going to talk about data management later. And so, you know, kind of just by virtue of building like modern software to some extent, you can replace a lot of these legacy solutions. And then I would say that the other key piece for us is we've been investing a lot into, you know, leveraging modern AI tools to help with some of the more let's call it boring parts of being a scientist, right? Munging data around, just getting a plot down on the page. And so I think it's a combination of building modern software and taking advantage of the latest tools that lets us be a lot more effective than kind of your typical research workflow.
Yeah, that sounds, I mean, yeah, I think like one of the things that I guess someone working in the lab as a academic trainee, it's hard to actually imagine because we're so kind of like so used to working with bad tools that it's hard to imagine how much better our lives can be with these tools. So I guess I'd like to hear more about how as like yeah, I guess like how like maybe perhaps like imagine for someone in the day-to-day basis how like this person how would this tool actually improve their daily routine, I suppose. And Nicholas, I will circle back to you in a bit, but
Sure.
I don't like Alex or Bogdan, you would like to elaborate on that.
Maybe Bogdan, you go
Yeah,
because I'll
sure.
talk about like API and stuff like that.
Sure. Sure. It'll be good. I'll bridge to what Nicholas said, and then you can bridge to something I'll say. So I think that like modern, it's funny, like that modern software point is like, I think really important to stress just because when you look at the alternatives. So for us, a lot of the ways that people are like trying to solve the problems we solve is through effectively it's through like PowerPoints, these like really unruly PowerPoint decks, or like homebrewed solutions that they've built themselves in-house. And when you look at software that's, you know, not doing what we're doing, but it's been around in the space, it also by and large looks like it was built like 30, 40 years ago. And it makes a difference because of just like the cognitive load, I think, that it introduces for people to figure out like, how do I do something, and how quickly can I do something, and how quickly can I get back to doing work that I'm actually here to do. And so for us, I think, yeah, taking even just like how we constructed the team, not just with the three, like us three co-founders, but how we hired the team as well. It's taking the best of like design principles. One of my co-founders is like a designer that moved into product. So taking the best of design principles, taking the best of like modern engineering architecture, and then like contextualizing it for this space is one key thing. Another like important point for us has been the way we approach the problem is like, okay, if you are a team, like a biotech team, and you have these like pretty existential milestones that you're going after, that like if you don't hit them within that time frame, basically like the company doesn't exist anymore. So you have these like pretty existential milestones. You're generating a ton of data across your team, but also like other teams. And then you're making decisions periodically. Sometimes those are like weekly cadence, sometimes they're monthly, sometimes they're quarterly. Kind of depends on like what the decision at hand is. But you're making these decisions and you're informing those decisions by all of the work that you're doing collectively, or like the key data that you're generating across these different teams. And so like when we looked at what the alternatives were, it was like really scary to think that people were screenshotting results into PowerPoint decks that are like 100 to 200 slides long, on like a literal weekly cadence and then rinse and repeating week over week. And then wondering like, wait, I don't know why we prioritize this compound, or like, why did we just spend $1 million of R&D pushing this forward? Like, who did that work? Like, where was that work? Like, what other projects do we have ongoing? What stakeholders do we need to update on that progress? Like, that was happening in this like really manual way. And then we were seeing this like emergence of teams that had just in the last several years accepted that they have to build things themselves, because they just can't rely on generic tooling or PowerPoint and spreadsheets. And when we talk to those teams, what we hear is like, well, this cost us, 3 to 4 engineers and 4 years of work. And so you can just do the math on like financially how much that is, and also like opportunity cost, why that's a problem. And so I think like just this approach from our perspective of like, you need to build tools that assume that teams are going to be collaborating pretty tightly with like large volumes of data, and then you need to build those things in a way that is adaptable and extensible for the way teams work today. And this is where I'm going to like pass it off to you, Alex. But like in our mind, that was, the intuitiveness of the platform needs to be like world caliber. And then also we have like basically 2 products. The second product is the API, which is acknowledging that there's just going to be some teams that don't care about the interface and like need to extend a platform or a framework to fit their needs. And you can't possibly build features for every person on the planet quickly enough. And so giving those more like data heavy teams a way to leverage and extend what you're doing, I think is like just really important in this space, and like not something that many companies, if any, have frankly done in the last couple of decades. But I don't know, Alex, if you want to just like dive much deeper into the API side of how you think about it.
I mean, I would just kind of talk about what's close to my heart, and that's sort of like coming from my time of leading chem informatics, computational biology, and ML engineering teams at Celerity, and sort of talking to companies who have these teams, biotech, tech bios, who have these today. And so for me, it wasn't so much Excel and Prism and PowerPoint. Like it was more like S3, AWS S3 or Google Cloud Storage, and then sort of some SQL databases, and then ELN LIMS systems, and sort of teams of computational biologists to kind of try to ad hoc query these systems and apply machine learning models on them to like feed insight back to a drug project team. And ML engineer trying to like, use MLOps tools that interrogate these systems and sort of iterate on machine learning pipelines that provide, the models to like then help the computational biologist teams and sort of across biology and chemistry. And so what we're struggling with is sort of there was no layer on top of AWS or Google Cloud, an API layer that would make it much easier to interrogate data at scale and harmonize data at scale, so that for instance, many people train foundation models now on large numbers of data sets, say scRNA-seq data, imaging data, readout data, and that's pretty hard. And it's been enabled for some organizations in the public space to a degree, but it was almost impossible until like recently, sort of in the scRNA-seq space. And what Lemon does is give you that API layer that sits on top of S3 and Google Cloud Storage and databases. It's open source, and you have sort of all the data at your fingertips with an open source tool. And we think this is sort of what enables that specific audience of computational biologists the most.
So quick follow-up question to that. We've heard the word API and API layer appear a couple times in our conversation so far. But I'd like to actually invite you all to define that in the context of this conversation, because I think some of us who are not computation oriented might not be very familiar with what an API is, or some of us who are might understand that it's communication between programs, but not quite familiar with what it means exactly in this context. So Alex,
So
would you like to take the question?
when I say API, I mean a Python API that under the hood talks to like cloud infrastructure on AWS or Google Cloud, and yeah, allows you to pull data sets at scale into whatever, you know, ML engineering or analytics tasks you're working on. And so for me or for Lamin, it's really important that we hit sort of on the cloud level directly AWS APIs or Google APIs, and not some sort of idiosyncratic LIMS system or ELN systems, because these APIs historically suck a lot. So we wanted to build directly on top of AWS and Google and expose that to our sort of comp.bio users and ML engineering users, very akin to like, you know, tools like DVC or like sort of biology agnostic MLOps tools or ML flow, right? That's what I mean with API.
Got it. Thank you. Since we're on the topic of AI and ML-driven workflows, and I know, Bogdan, you also briefly touched on how there were basically you've observed that there are these emergence of teams that have accepted that they have to build things themselves, and they're using perhaps building tools to automate manual or repetitive tasks in terms of like perhaps documentation and recording data. And I'd like to hear in each of the solutions that you're building at your individual companies, are you using AI? Are you integrating AI into any of your solutions? If yes, how so? Oh, Bogdan, you would like,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
can
know who
kick it
would like to
off.
go
Yeah,
next.
yeah. I mean, I actually think of this in two ways. It's like, how do we use it internally? And then like, what's our positioning to AI relative to the rest of the
Right.
of our market? So I think for the former, it's a lot of the kind of what you'd expect, given like the trends in the space, which is like, how do we use these tools to just make the experience for the user a lot easier? Whether that's like finding something that they really like need to find quickly, whether it's like organizing and displaying or like digesting information a certain way. So it's like both the interfacing with the platform as well as the like what the outputs are. So there's that aspect. Of it, which I think is probably not a surprise to like anyone that's been like keeping up with the news. And then there's the like second part, which is like how do I don't really pitch Kaleidoscope ever as like, oh, we're an AI company in that regard. The way I actually like to frame things is a lot of teams expect that they can do a lot of like great ML on their like on the knowledge that they're accruing, when the reality is that until you have a pretty robust system whereby you've like organized your stuff and you understand like what you did and the like metadata around it and the tags associated with it and like how you're structuring and organizing your knowledge is going to really like limit or enable how much you can like learn from that over time. And so the pitch that for some companies that we work with, the pitch that's like really relevant is, you know, you have a bunch of knowledge that you're generating and data that you're generating, and you want to be able to do things with that. And so what like Kaleidoscope as a framework lets you do is like bring structure to that so that like your data science teams can then do the queries and analyses and modeling that they want based off of the like relationships that we're helping your organization define just through using Kaleidoscope. So it's this like two-pronged like productivity level of like, hey, you just do these things better and more intuitively, and it'll make your day-to-day life easier. And then longer term, it's you'll come out of it not just like more productive directly, but also with now like a much more organized and like logical system in place that you can like apply ML onto.
Right. Did Alex or Nicholas, did you have anything to add to this?
I mean, I'll just echo briefly. I think that division is very important, right? There's a a lot of talk on protein language models and single cell foundation models, and there's a lot of like really interesting work going on that piece of like the AI space. And I think all three of our companies are, kind of born out of experiences working with companies who are like pushing the envelope there. But then, a lot of our focus is on scientific productivity. There's been kind of some recent studies showing that, 18 hours a week or 40% of a scientist's time is spent on like non-scientific tasks, right? This involves, finding data, cleaning data, making presentations, actually presenting the work. And obviously some of that's like very important, right? Scientific communication is, of course, part of the job, but, our take is that some of that is actually just busy work and, grinds you down, and like a lot of that can and will be automated away by AI. And so I think the AI for scientific productivity is, in my view, actually underexplored. We started incorporating it into our product. Since we're in a data management regulatory panel, like I'll say, like you have to be concerned about this, especially when dealing with biotech companies, and IP is their lifeblood, and we can talk more about that. But I think as a whole, as an industry, actually we've underexplored the ways that these kind of general purpose LLMs can improve scientists' life. One small example that we have in our platform is just like type what you want the plot to be, right? You're visualizing data, we have an extensive, graphical user interface to, go through and build these plots and customize them and make them figure ready. But to get started, just like tell us what you want the plot to be, right? And that's kind of like a very simple thing. It solves the blank page problem of like, what should I be looking at? And I think there's just like a lot of the space for people to continue to innovate on this for the scientific process.
Yeah, so that's a great segue for us to get into the compliance related questions. So I guess like taking the example that you just shared about solving the blank page problems, like what kind of plot I've like, and maybe someone has like a really vague idea and then that's what they put into the system. But in this process, how does this tool that you are proposing as a solution facilitate, I guess, like maintain data integrity and compliance at the same time when you're using the tool?
Well, so I think there's two pieces here. One is on the compliance side, like making sure the user and the organizations are aware, when you're using AI features, right? We're using OpenAI or kind of other model providers as a sub-processor, right? And, ensuring that they're aware of that and being able to turn that off, right? That's very important for us, is like, you can turn off AI features, right? So if you don't want data to go into these model providers, you can say no. But then the other piece is thinking about like, okay, like once you've used these AI models, how do you store the results, right? How do you ensure reproducibility? And so for us, we spend a lot of time taking the results of these AI models and then putting them in a format that our system can understand and storing that, right? So we treat that the same as if you just like manually built the plot yourself. And so once you're kind of like in that format, right, the rest of our kind of compliance kicks in, right? We maintain audit trails and lineage and all that stuff, which is kind of very important for the regulatory piece. And so I think you do need to be a little bit careful about how you're using these kind of like LLMs, but I definitely don't think it's
But is it like even like a hard sort of no-go to like feed anything into like an OpenAI API if you want to be HIPAA compliant? I mean, it's just
so we don't deal with HIPAA data. So like we're not dealing with patient data or anything like that. But there are companies who do help provide these models, and you can actually self-host the open source, right? Like there's a lot of solutions around this, right? Like our solution so far has been, we don't deal with patient data. We're not HIPAA compliant. Don't put your patient data in here. But then the other piece again is like, you can turn off the, right? Like everything we build, you can use without the AI features. And so it's kind of it's supercharging if you want it, but you don't have to use it.
I have some thoughts here, but Alex, I don't know if you want to go first.
Oh yeah, I mean, so I'll sort of provide the perspective of the biotech that builds a lot on AWS themselves, and what's really hard in my experience is permission management, access management across storage and databases. So Lemon makes that a lot easier. So we issue federated tokens with a simple sort of SaaS-like permission management systems for how like then data scientists, computational biologists hit the AWS APIs and take a lot. It's all, yeah. It's really hard to get sort of permission management right on AWS, and we make it easier. The other thing is data lineage and audit trials, and that's another focus of for us and sort of the differentiator, or like our emphasis is also all of that is or the data lineage part is entirely open source. Sort of the audit is part of the SaaS layer that we build on top. But yeah, these are the two things that we contribute sort of on the compliance front.
Yeah, permissions management also rings true for us. Like we have our like a similar like a whole system for that, so that like a customer coming in and setting up like a Kaleidoscope workspace can now there's like stuff that comes out of box, but they can also get like very granular if they want in terms of like defining what kind of users have access to what. I think like more just broadly than that, because the question was like how do we maintain integrity and compliance?
Yeah.
So one big thing for us, and we prioritize this like really early on. We got 21 CFR Part 11 compliance, and then we have like SOC 2 Type 2 auditing done. And so what that means for people who aren't familiar with that, basically the latter SOC 2 Type 2 is like proving how that you're a good data steward, that you're like have good security in place and good systems in place internally so that your customers can like trust that the data is safe. And then 21 CFR Part 11 is an FDA thing, and that's to basically say that you can like at any point in time, you're like versioning what's being done like, very robustly, so that at any point in time, to use like more technical speak, like where our database is like append only. There's no like hard delete. So if someone in our interface says like, oh, I'm going to change this whatever information here, or I'm going to like delete this, like if it deletes in their view or changes in their view, it hasn't been like deleted or changed in a database. And we make it really easy for our customers, not just for stuff that they're doing natively in Kaleidoscope now, but also like any tools that they've hooked into us. For if things are changed in a tool that we're synced with or directly in Kaleidoscope, we will show people very visually like, hey, this is the value. Like, by the way, it's changed like 6 times. And like, here is where each change came from. And if there was like a mistake and they need to roll something back, they can do that. But we took that, like, basically our stats is like, you can't mess around with stuff like the integrity of data and like remaining compliant. And so we wanted to make sure that like, not only do customers that we work with have peace of mind that we are not using their data to like do any modeling or like spin out a biotech ourselves. Like we're using their data, only the like usage level, and it's anonymized and aggregated so that we can like improve the product for them and not like do our own analyses. There's that like legal protections, and also like how we treat the data itself in the system, and like will they be able to have peace of mind that they can pinpoint exactly where like a result came from and any value that's ever changed like through our system. And we wanted to make sure that the answer there was yes.
Thank you. Actually, that nicely dovetails to the next follow-up question I have, which is you mentioned something about tools that are so you could so I guess like a client of Kaleidoscope could use external tools that are synced with the platform. And I'm wondering if you could speak more to software interoperability? Because I imagine not every, so I guess like clients would be using different kinds of tools at different points of time. And there's always this risk of data leakage or whatnot when they're switching tools or they're integrating a new tool. So I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, do you mean just like generally our approach to it, or?
Yeah, that's right. While keeping compliance in mind, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for us it was like acknowledgement that like there is, personally, I just like don't believe in a world where there's like monolithic one software rules them all, for an industry that's as complex as bio. And so our like default assumption from day one was like people are gonna have their suite of tools that they like. And for anything that's not our sweet spot in terms of our like core product offering, and like what we think we're excellent at, people are just we should assume that people want to bring their own tools. And what we should do is make it really easy for them to, for anything they are switching over to us, like port over to us. For anything they want to move off of Kaleidoscope, be able to like move off and not be blocked. And then for anything that they want to keep in other tools, and like use in like harmony with our platform, we should make it really easy to do. So like over the last several months, we've really pushed a lot on like our ability to keep like concrete objects that might sit in another piece of software, like synced with Kaleidoscope, so that if in Kaleidoscope, for the purposes of like managing your scientific project or sitting down on your weekly meeting and deciding like, okay, do we want to like put the next 3 months of work into compound A or compound B? If there's like critical data that you need to reference to make that decision, and that data already sits somewhere else, then you should be able to point to it, without having to go and like find that tool, find the exact sheet it was in, copy that value and paste it back in. You should just like one time set up that that hook into the tool and tell Kaleidoscope like, these are the fields I care about in this tool. I want to see them here. And then just have peace of mind that like at the end of every day or at the end of every week or whatever, like we will keep those things synced for you. So I think like from again, the compliance angle here is like it's important to keep the bar in mind. And for us, like seeing that teams are doing this right now in PowerPoint or hacking together tools themselves, like that's the bar for compliance in the kind of problem space that we're in. And that's like a terrible system for keeping integrity high and like compliance high. And so we've like 100x'd the ability for people to do this more thoughtfully and robustly compared to how it's done today.
Thank you. Nicholas or Alex, I don't know if you have anything to jump in at this point.
I assume Alex does, since
As for interoperability, I mean, for us, it's first and foremost the interoperability with the entire open source
Right.
base, and the major cloud providers, and you know, tools like Benchling is something that we are interoperable with, but like, yeah, sort of our integrations are still not, you know, there where we want them, and we'll, so the integration suite towards commercial ELN LIMS systems is gonna come later this year or early next year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I have too much to add other than I think scientists typically don't want to have to learn a bunch of different tools. And so if you can lower the barrier to, oh, well, I have to like, you know, do this whole process to move data between tools. And as Bogdan was saying, right, your data from one tool just shows up in another tool, that can go a long way. And so, you know, integrating with different systems is important. We integrate with some of the major you know, LIMS vendors as kind of like the primary data sources in the biotech industry. And then, as the other two I've mentioned, exposing kind of like friendly APIs for other tools to integrate with you as well. but I think it also depends a little bit on the problem you're trying to solve. There's like certain pieces of the discovery process which care more about compliance than others, right? It depends like where you are in the drug discovery process, right? So like the closer you are to clinic, the more like compliance and compliance across interoperability matters. The earlier you are in preclinical R&D, I'd say like a little less important. Not saying it's not important, but it's kind of not the primary focus of a lot of the users and companies we talk with.
Right. Actually, I did have a follow-up question to what you had talked about earlier about HIPAA compliance. I'm wondering, are there any other, I suppose, perhaps like pick one or two examples where the platform that you, or I guess a tool that you are offering, could address, I guess it could address the needs of a client versus not. So as you mentioned earlier, you mentioned that you're not HIPAA compliant, but are there other instances where, yeah, I guess are there other like similar instances where your tool may or may not apply, I suppose?
Sorry, I don't think I quite understood.
Yeah,
Like,
I guess, sorry, that was
we're
kind of
not
a vague
HIPAA
question.
compliant. I don't know if the other two are, but as Bogdan mentioned, right, 21 CFR, ISO 2701.
Right.
There are like other compliance standards which are important. We're just not HIPAA compliant. I don't know if the other two platforms are.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah.
Yeah, I think
you want to jump in?
like it's very similar to us. That like when we work with customers that need to be HIPAA compliant, and because like they handle patient data, the conversation there becomes like, okay, how can we impart best practices for them, regardless of how they use Kaleidoscope? So we like had this come up the other day where basically a customer's like thinking about where to store certain patient things, and our recommendation was like definitely find like for data storage, like find a tool that is like very clearly reputable and like HIPAA compliant, and like they were thinking of like S3, basically the AWS stack. And then if there's things that you need to reference about that data and like point to an object that sits there without identifying like a patient, you can do that in ways that like we're compliant with. But it's the difference of like where do you actually store like identifiable information about the patient, like their sequencing, stuff like that. And like we're not the raw place where people put like sequencing files or like patient names. So yeah, it's like not not a challenge that we're faced with at the moment. I imagine, Alex, you're similar.
It's very similar for us, yeah. I mean, this is sort of we people have their data, the critical data on S3 on AWS, and we're just referencing it. And I'm helping advising on operating in a compliant way, sort of in AWS, with some help from like our sort of stack.
Thank you. So I guess I'll leave a little time in for company-specific questions. So I might sort of like jump around and call on you to answer specific questions, basically. And this question is for
just before you do, I just like one thing on like security
course.
that I think, again, just because you shared that the like audience here is like people thinking about starting stuff and like how do you get going.
Yeah,
So I think it's like really important. I'm like very, very thankful that my co-founder, like CTO co-founder, is like not just extremely competent, but B, like really, really takes security seriously. Like that competence goes a long way. So practically what that means, I think for anyone here like thinking about starting a company or like building in the space or like building out the stack in a company that you're already working, is just like making sure that you're choosing tools that actually support good security and like not being afraid to pay for stuff that will give you that peace of mind. So from our end, it's like, we're on AWS and like Cloudflare, and we use VPNs, and we like do all this stuff that makes it like, yeah, slightly harder to do your day-to-day work, but because we think it really matters that you like stay secure. We do like pen testing. We get third-party penetration tested, so people like just auditing us and saying like, yeah, the system is safe. We also do like our own kind of scans around vulnerability, and both like paid tools and free tools. We have like a lot of redundancy built in, so we use like a couple of paid tools and then a number of free ones to just make sure that like we're secure in that way. And so I guess the like 2 cents I would contribute to this for anyone like building is like think about security from the beginning, and don't like hunt that decision too far down the road, because getting a system in place and choosing what tools you will build on top of will make your life, I think, considerably harder or easier, and especially in a field like bio where you're handling like pretty sensitive data.
Yeah, fully
Oh,
agree.
thank you. Sorry, did I hear someone was going to add something?
I fully agreed on what Bogdan's saying. Yeah.
All right, yeah, let's get into the company-specific questions then. Alex, this one is for you actually. So I read on your website that there was discussion of a learning framework and emergent memory, and I'm wondering if you could actually elaborate more about what this concept is and what are different ways that a client or user can take advantage of this emergent memory.
Yeah, so this like it is a fancy way of distinguishing data lineage that comes from workflows and pipelining tools and sort of emergent data lineage. And so in the tool space, there is a ton of tools that allow you to specify deterministic workflows, computational workflows. And these are great tools like Redone or Prefect or Nextflow or SnakeMake or and they also give you good data lineage and allow you to trace back on how data transformed from the instruments to the insight. But like when a scientist interacts with a UI or like a computational biologist interacts with a Jupyter notebook and interrogates a warehouse or a data lake and makes decisions and sort of creates a one-time report of what they're doing. That's emergent. These are emergent data transformations. There's no tool that tracks that, and except so we think there's no tool that tracks it in a say Jupyter notebook except for LamonDB, which makes it really easy. You put sort of an API call into whatever you're doing, and everything, all the inputs, all the outputs are going to be tracked, and you create this like deep data lineage graph back into like the roots of what you've been doing. And it integrates well with the sort of deterministic, tools that I mentioned before, which are industry standard. Everybody's using them, but it really kind of fills this gap. And yeah, and that allows you to like start reasoning about like the entire history of what you did to the data as a scientist. And I mean, hopefully like at some point in the future you can also throw models on that graph, and so our focus is really kind of making this graph complete by making it like open source and like enabling everybody to just like embed that, and it's open lineage compliant, and sort of fulfills those sort of all the things that we think are necessary to like having potential to become that tool. Yeah.
Thank you. And for Bogdan, one of the things I read about, and I think I mentioned briefly earlier, was the concept of data rooms, which can be unfamiliar, at least was unfamiliar to me before I like read it on your website. So we want to like talk more about that and perhaps like discuss that in the context of compliance when you're sharing the data room with other people as well.
Yeah, I'll try and just cover that in the interest of time and to leave room for questions and stuff. I'll try and cover that briefly. But yeah, basically a data room, traditionally a data room is like a virtual place where you go to drop files that you need to for something like a fundraising event. So you'll get asked by investors after you like do the pitch to them, you get asked like for proof that what you said is true. So if you said you had like 10 customers paying you X amount, like they'll want to see those contracts, or like proof that like your employees are under employee contracts and like you've done all of that. And so a data room serves as like a repository where you go traditionally, again, where you go and like leave all this stuff. Someone looks at it, lawyers like approve it, they ask you clarifying questions, and then if everything looks good, you like do the deal and move on. And they're very static places that you only revisit like this on this like very, very slow cadence. In bio, there's this like really interesting like phenomenon where the data room in bio, because that's where you're housing where you're housing like your key results and like the experiments that led you to say like, oh crap, like this is a really exciting thing and we should invest a lot of money here, or this is our plan for like the programs we're going to be advancing and like what assets are under each of those programs and what therapeutic modalities, like all of those questions, and all of the like artifacts that support your plan and like your reasoning as to why you are or aren't doing something, like all of that goes into what's effectively a data room. It's like a place where you're storing this knowledge. And so it's like much more encompassing than a data room in like non-R&D fields. And B, the cadence is way higher with which you interact with that information. So these are like weekly meetings that you might be reviewing with your team, or monthly board updates, or pharma partner collaborations, and you're like constantly referencing like very important information. And so what we realized was the tools that people are using for this today, it's like the dump happens in like a Dropbox or a box or a Google Drive folder or whatever, and then the like contextualization and like tying together of rationale and plan happens in like a PowerPoint. And that is just very manually intensive to curate, and also just very unreliable because you have like no actual tie to the data that's sitting, like an actual file or like object sitting in a log notebook. Sorry?
It's a total mess. It's zero integrity.
Yeah, it completely messes up your integrity. It's very painful to construct by hand. It's not dynamic. So you're like sitting there. The number of times people have said like, I'm sitting there in front of like a pharma partner, and this is like my first chance to like get a major deal with my biotech. And the pharma partner sees a thing and they're like, wait, did you do this other experiment? And I don't know how to answer because I just showed them a screenshot on a slide, and I have to like email a team member to be like, hey, do we have this experiment? And there's no like dynamic way to interact with this. And so the way we think about, and like the way our customers think about Kaleidoscope is like, oh, this is like a much more powerful data room. It's really where I'm going to reference the key information, because I'm not storing my, like I said, my raw sequences on Kaleidoscope. I'm not doing my like diarying out of like how much I pipetted of what into what in Kaleidoscope. I'm putting like my most central information about like what decision I'm making and why. And so that serves that purpose in bio. But yeah, I think it's like a unique thing to an R&D heavy field compared to like tech or like other fields where you're not really like your data room's not informing your actual decisions with regularity.
Thank you. So yeah, in the interest of time, I'm gonna jump straight to Nicholas. So the last question for you is, so correct me if I'm wrong here. So when we bring in an ML model, open source or otherwise, once we bring it into a intuitive interface, then my assumption is it becomes less transparent to the user potentially. So how do you balance considerations between transparency, usability, and compliance?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I'll maybe differentiate between different types of models. So we were talking a little bit earlier about AI, which is a broad term. Let's specifically talk about LLMs, right? The chat GPTs of the world. Again, like for us, the transparency is we convert those responses into something that's like native in our system, as if you could have built it yourself. And so there's a little bit of what you see is what you get here, right? Like there's no magic going on. Well, the magic is taking the raw data and converting it into something that's kind of like native to Sphinx. But you can then interrogate that, right? We're not hiding anything from you. I think when you talk about kind of other ML models in the space, we launched a folding playground a few months ago where you could use AlphaFold and ESMFold and different protein structure prediction models to take sequences and turn into structure. You have that as well, right? And you can, interrogate the output. That's maybe slightly less interpretable, right? Because you don't know how good the structure prediction is. But I think that's like a key piece is like anytime you're abstracting away one of these models, you have to think pretty carefully about like, okay, what do you show at the end? And in this case, if you can show something to a user that they can understand, then it's, in my view, okay that they don't understand every single piece that's going into it. Maybe Alex disagrees, I think more on the ML side. But I think as you're talking more, and this is more about like deployment of ML models, as you're thinking more about training ML models, that's like a whole different game. I'm not touching that at all. But I think the key piece there is you have to kind of track the inputs and you have to track the outputs, and then you have to make sure that those outputs are interpretable to the users. And that I think that's summed up, but I think that's actually like a very tricky thing to do. And that's why let's say the more complex the output is, right? If you just recommended like a drug candidate as the output of your model, that's actually like very hard to interpret. You have to go and like test that in the lab to like make sure that works. If we're just kind of like outputting a clean data set or a visualization or a plot that someone can like look at and validate with their own two eyes that, okay, this is what I would have done otherwise, I just sped up that process, then I think that's actually a lot easier. And at the end of the day, you're going to use that information hopefully to make better drug candidates. But I think that's why we've stayed away from this, okay, AI is a magic black box where you put in a bunch of stuff and out comes like the desired result, because you lack a lot of that transparency. Rather, we're helping you do what you would do anyway, just like much easier and much faster.
Thank you. So I'd like to transition into audience questions, but we still have a couple minutes. So I'd like to ask you all to perhaps tell the audience what kinds of common mistakes or patterns of mistakes that you've seen your clients have made when they're building their biotech startup, or when they're first, it's like for their first time for like their first forays into data compliance and management. I know we've talked a lot about the frustrations, or in terms of the repetitiveness and all that, but I'm wondering if there's other common patterns of like mistakes.
Our clients are perfect, they do no wrong.
So I mean, I think what's been described on sort of Excel and like PowerPoint, etc., and no data lineage, no versioning, no audit trial ability, sort of no integrity. I think this is true also like for the sort of computational, a lot of the computationally heavy companies, and so and then it extends to there's a one bucket of compliance, and then it extends in my experience to like access management, permission management, least privileges, etc. on these like cloud systems, because you're so overwhelmed. You like don't have the time to like unless you hire a very senior sort of data engineer to become an AWS expert. So it's very easy to completely get lost in these topics. So it's the state of the industry is, I don't think so not only in the wet lab and sort of the Excel, etc., but also sort of in the dry lab, and with exceptions.
Right.
Yeah.
I think, and obviously we're all biased because we build and sell software to biotech companies, but I think there's especially for like early stage startups, there's buying software too soon and there's not buying enough software. Again, biased, so take it with a grain of salt. But I think in general, especially for companies coming out of someone's PhD, they're not used to like purchasing software for the most part, or thinking about how software can like affect their productivity. And I would say like for a very early stage company, it actually feels a lot like academic research, right? You're just trying to get proof points and kind of show that things work. But then as you start to scale, it quickly moves out of that, right? You have teams and teams have to work together, and you want to make use of the data for more than just a paper, right? You're trying to inform kind of like long-term defensibility of your company. And I think that transition, knowing when that is, is really hard. And, you know, I would say there's kind of like the key piece of where I see companies go wrong is like, if you do it too early and you slow everyone down, that's not a great thing. If you wait too late and everyone is kind of like doing their own thing, it can be hard to get your house in order in the first place. And so thinking very carefully about like, okay, like I want to put in some software to help us scale, like, you know, slightly before we need it. And oftentimes the companies you talk to will help advise those decisions, right? I think Bach did mention earlier, right? Like, you know, we certainly have the same perspective of like, even if something's like not our job, it's not our platform, we're happy to give advice based on what we've seen, right? We've worked at, you know, various biotech and biotech software companies. And so we've seen a lot of different things. And so I think you can get a lot of help from companies like us, you know, early on to set you up for success later. And maybe the last thing I'll say is, like thinking about this like return on investment, right? I think, again, you're not used to buying software if you come out of a PhD program, right? You're either going to build it yourself as part of your thesis, or maybe you have like lab or institutional licenses. But you know, you are used to spending a lot on reagents and lab machines, right? And these are like big expenses to generate this data, which then usually sits unused, right? And so I think, you know, all of our hopes, I assume, is that like the next generation of scientists are more computationally minded and kind of recognize the value of data and using that. And so I think we're going to start to see people want these tools, right? Whether it's for your computational team, right? Whether it's for kind of like your data rooms and kind of project management, whether it's for data analysis and assay analytics. I think we're all kind of betting on this future of like, okay, data is really important. Biotechs need to take advantage of their data in order to be the most effective company they can be. And therefore, like, they need to buy software to help with that because it's much cheaper than generating millions of dollars of data and letting it sit in S3 or Excel and never using it again.
I don't think I have much to add. I agree with all that. I think like the timing or punting of a decision is like a mistake I see a lot of people make. And it's maybe not a mistake when you're super early on and you just like literally have hair on fire problems, but that's not actually where we often from our standpoint observe it. It's actually people who know that they should do something and they're like, oh, but like, should I do it now or like in 6 months? We've been lucky that like a lot of the early customers we work with have like internal champions that just like get it and they're like, no, I will make a case for this in the company because like there's no way that what we're doing is sustainable. And if our goal is to become like a biotech that has assets in the clinic or has like sold to pharma or partnered with pharma, like we just need to have like a very smooth pipeline in place. And so we would then work closely with those champions to like show them and help them frame like why this is valuable to their organization. But yeah, like I think I agree completely with what both Alex and Nicholas said. Like it often just gets punted because you're like, oh, I don't know, like, is it worth like 3 hours of my time this week? But the reality is like if you wait a year, that 3 hours becomes like 3 months very quickly because you're having to like retrofit or fix things that you've just let accrue for so long.
And then it gets lost and unusable.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the take-home message is don't wait and just start tracking your data.
Yeah, or if your
Yeah.
gut is telling you that you should be doing something or like that something's gonna break, like it's probably accurate. So yeah, advocate for it in your team.
Thanks, everyone. So let's actually move on to audience questions. And I don't know if everyone is able to see the question and answer pop up, but I can read that. The first question actually was posed a couple, I guess like about half an hour ago. So perhaps it would circle back to our earlier discussions, which is clinical regulatory environments can be adverse to change once a process has been validated. How do we manage the changes that come with a learning and evolving AI tool?
So the way we manage these changes is we track the AI tool as code, and we version the code, and we version the inputs and the outputs, and hash everything together so that it has integrity. And what we can't yet do is sort of lock the models, but that would be a natural thing to do, sort of the typical locking of documents that you have in these environments sort of in ELN systems. That's something that's going to be needed, I think, for models.
Nicholas, did you have something to add?
I mean, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but none of us are in clinical environments is like the real answer here. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think we talked a little bit about that with HIPAA compliance, right? It's like you just focus on a different set of problems. Yeah, I think there's like a whole class of companies working on AI and LLM models for clinicians, for clinical trials, and all of that, and they deal with a different set of problems than kind of preclinical R&D.
Yeah, there's also like a sub question here, maybe like another way to interpret this question is like, change management's hard. So if you have something and it works, like why mess with it or whatever. And I think the reality is that like for a lot of there's 2 points that come to mind. For a lot of like problems that the three of us are at least working on, there just isn't something that's good enough. But that's the whole premise why the three of us are building what we're building. And then for the stuff that like the general concept of like, oh, drug discovery has worked this way, and like, we know that this like new way of working has worked for the last 5 years. Like, why would we change it? I think the answer there is like increasingly we're seeing like the low-hanging fruit being picked. And so the like way that you keep getting new therapeutics to the market or like new science to the market is by like challenging what you're doing and how you're doing it. And so 100% like agreed with the point of the question, like managing change is hard, and it definitely is. And it's like on us also as like service providers to make that change management easier and like partner thoughtfully and like be supportive and all of that. But then the pitch back to people is to say like, the whole reason why we've seen so many escalating costs, or not the whole reason, but a major part of the reason we've seen so many escalating costs in like drug discovery and getting a drug to market and all of that is because, these like the way of working has picked all the like low-hanging fruit here, and you need to challenge how you work and find better and smarter ways to work if you want to stay like competitive.
Yeah, actually, I suppose this is sort of related to the next question of why use ML and not traditional programming. And my sense of what I've learned so far is the automation really comes in useful for the things that we are probably doing already like day-to-day basis. And we know that if we don't do it ourselves if basically we just like don't automate it, we will be doing it manually every single day out by ourselves. So perhaps perhaps to frame that question slightly differently, what do you think is what do you think there are cases, actually perhaps like flip it and say, what do you think doesn't actually need ML?
I probably Alex and Nicholas is probably best for you guys, because I would say like in terms of our product, we're very traditional programming in how we're built. Like we're not using ML to like build the product. There's like certain ML capabilities that we have added to make it like easier for someone to do something. But we're a very traditional software, like first principle software company that then like adds these like little applications on top. But Alex and Nicholas, I know you both are more in the weeds with like the raw data, and so you might actually be interweaving things on like a lower level.
So from my perspective, what's turned out is that ML models are already like great for hypothesis generation and discovery, and for when it comes to establishing truth and the sort of results from an experiment, then often sort of classical statistics is what you should still be doing. And so there is just like so much unknown for me, to be honest, but there's like a transition between leveraging ML models and training them in-house and using deployed and sort of taking care that they don't, hallucinate, and then sort of like doing good statistics and using the classical statistic stack. And I don't have like a good answer for where exactly the boundaries. I think everybody has to figure this out. This is sort of one of the, things that you need to figure out doing research in that space. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth emphasizing the difference between what we're mean when we say AI, right? There's like LLM usage for productivity. Sure, you could program that, but sometimes there's like there's a lot of different like paths that someone could go, and these LLMs are like decent proxies for reasoning agents. So like rather than writing a lot of deterministic code, you can sometimes take a shortcut. That has its own challenges. And then there's separate kind of like what Alex is talking about, AI for science, let's call it, hypothesis generation. I think like the simplest example for me is, again, like for like AlphaFold comes out, it's protein structure prediction. Sure, you can crystallize proteins and actually get like a measurement of their structure, but that's like slow and expensive. And so can we just like use a model to predict that? Is like a very obvious, well, not obvious, but like a very clear use case for ML that you wouldn't really be able to like write software to do that. You could do experiments to do that, but there's kind of like clear benefits for having an ML model that does this effectively.
Yeah, actually, I want to follow up on this question a little bit. I guess, are they specific use cases for where there's like a clear disadvantage for actually using ML?
Disadvantage?
Yeah, like it's a bad idea to use ML for this specific use case.
Well, if your ML model is bad, that can be worse than not
Right.
having anything at all, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
over-interpreting predictions is like being overconfident in predictions and having no good statistics in place to reason about them, and no good validation sort of pipeline that like plugs these predictions into experiments, etc. So it's very easy to like do a lot of nonsense with ML models. Yeah.
Yeah, and I see a third question here that's probably related. So it's the question of like so basically it's a comment about there's no solution that's perfect. So where do you all see yourselves going and expanding your existing platforms or products?
I mean, for us, I think there's like a wealth of information and knowledge that's currently inaccessible when it comes to like, I guess, more operational questions and things like where are we over-investing or under-investing, and like how do we effectively like distill this like last 6 months of work into like actions we can take or experiments we can run. So like that kind of higher level like management of decisions and processes and like productivity. I think there's like a whole like world of things that we're only touching on now that we can, like, I could see us giving teams like really powerful tools based off of already questions that they ask us to answer for them. And so I'm personally really excited to do that. And it's not really directly related to our product, but it's, I think, definitely relevant to everything we've talked about today, which is this like interoperability. And so like I just really, really believe that there's a lot of opportunity for like the right use of a few different tools to like really augment how you do work. And so I'm personally really excited for the world where there's like much more natural plugs into other players in the space, so that as a biotech, similar to other fields, like if you look at the developer world 15 years ago compared to now, and like how people think of their stack, and they think of these like discrete problems, and like, yes, there's complexity and you're going to need to like solve for the long tail, but at the end of the day, you're like, okay, this tool is really great for this tool is really great for this tool is really great for this. If I have a system by which I can like pipe information accurately, like I'll just be operating much more efficiently than if I try and like do all that myself. And so I'm seeing this more and more, not just like with Alex and Nicholas and like other players in the space that are thinking in this way. And so it's exciting to me generally to think of a world where we're creating these like natural synergies between products, so that like biotech at the end of the day can just take half the amount of time to get to a major milestone than they do today. And that requires work. That's why I'm saying it's like relevant to the question of like, where do you see the product expanding? Like it requires work to like build a good integration. Like I also like I see companies that'll say like, oh, we integrate with, and they'll list like 1,000 tools, and it's like, is that like a meaningful integration? Are you just like putting things there for marketing purposes? Like actually building a meaningful integration where like it feels magical, and it's like this person or team did this in this tool, and like holy shit, everything I need in this other place is just there, and vice versa, and then it like routes back. Like that takes work. And so I just like this thought of like community tool building, and like where we can go, like where we can get to if more people operate with that mental model.
Alex, you let it go next. The question was, where do you all see yourselves going with the next couple years, expanding your existing products or platform?
Oh, I mean, we think there is sort of no biology-aware data harmonization layer for the cloud stack, and so we're just trying to do this well at Lemon, and if we can make that happen so that people will love it, love the sort of developer experience of it, then we achieved sort of our goal. And well, that maybe after that we can talk about all the meta reasoning on that, right? Sort of like enabling like really different kinds of reasoning on all that like data lineage and all this stuff, but this is still out for me and for us at Lemon.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, a lot of science in industry is oriented around like one core system called like an ELN or LIMS. They're often related, not always, but that is very lab focused. It's like, I'm going to write down what I'm going to do in the lab, and then I'm going to record, where I left the plasmids, right? And that leaves out a lot of things that are happening more and more outside the lab, right? And so I think all three of us are talking about this. And so our focus is really on building the counterpoint of the LIMS for your scientists, for that experimental data. And so, we've started by dealing with kind of like one common modality, which is like plate-based assays. So running at kind of like higher throughput scale, and being able to handle that really well. But there's a lot of other different types of data that get generated in most drug discovery companies that we want to be able to handle. And so our path forward is being the home for all these different types of data and helping you kind of like relate your insights across them.
Thank you. So I actually still see one other question, not in the Q&A box, but in the webinar chat. So I'm gonna read it out in case folks don't have access to it. So it's, how is your revenue model different for individual researchers versus medium to large size enterprises? I personally am not familiar with financial lingo, so I don't know if revenue model is similar to pricing model, or I'm assuming this is like sort of like idea of like charging. Is there, I guess, like charging people differently from people in academia as individual researchers versus larger pharma or like biotech company, I suppose?
Yeah, I can go. We provide our tool for free to academics, so anyone can use it in their own individual research, and then we sell it to kind of larger companies, and those companies get additional security guarantees, they get additional collaboration features, they get a number of things that are not relevant to the individual academic researcher. And so that's the kind of like core distinction that we see is, we want to promote open science. We want to provide tools that are useful for researchers in academia. But there are certain considerations that are really important to larger enterprises and just not relevant to the academics. And so it works nicely to have kind of different pricing models for those two different offerings.
Got it.
Alex?
We have a free open source plan that anyone can use, and we have an enterprise plan that, yeah, is also like much cheaper for academics, but not entirely free. And yeah, so it typical B2B enterprise.
Yeah, I don't have anything new to add. We don't segment really like academic or not, but it is this like spectrum of like convenience that you need. And so the reality is like if you're one or two people or you're an academic team or whatever, you just like don't need some of the things that you naturally do as an enterprise. Like support is a good example where it's like you don't need 24/7 support, on-call support if you're like an academic lab. You might really care about that if you're an enterprise, or there's like a number of things like that. So for us, it's a spectrum there. So it's like a lot cheaper if you are on like one end of the spectrum than on the other.
Right. Yeah, and we have one final question here, actually, perhaps ending on a rather personal note. So did your founders have prior life science biotech experience before they opened these companies? If not, how easy was the transition into this industry? So I suppose this is like a kind of like a career question.
Yeah, I can kick this one off. In our case, we did spread of experience like academic, biotech, and then life science broadly. So like Google Health, for and like OICR, Ontario Institute of Cancer Research, and stuff for my co-founders. I think that like so obviously I had spent the most time in it. So like a lot of this stuff, the advantage there's like a lot of the things are familiar. The kind of flip to that is you can also have like blinders on if you've been in a space for a really long time. So I think it's just like really, for us, it was like really important that we're not over indexing on like our own biases. And so I thought, it was a combination of us making sure that we're talking to like many, many, many people external to us to like test certain assumptions. But also it was helpful that my co-founders, even though both of them had 2-3 years each in kind of like life science, that they didn't like come from the world, because I think you then sharpen each other, and you can kind of borrow what's like best from each like worldview or past set of experiences, and end up with something that's just a much better version than those individual parts.
I can go, I guess, yeah, I have worked in drug discovery companies for several years. Before that, worked in academic labs. So definitely have a life science background. I think I don't have too much more to add to Bogdan. I think he summarized it well. The only thing I would say is I do think there are paths for people to get into the life science space. And I started Bits and Bio, a community for people interested in software and science, and one of our big focuses is helping people get into the path. I do think it's valuable to spend some time here to understand the problems before just like diving into starting a company, but you don't have to. I think there's lots of problems to be solved, and they remain unsolved, and so I think having a lot of people working on these problems is important, because they're really important problems to solve. And that's kind of why I got into bio and the life sciences, interesting technical problems, potential for large impact. And I think that's why we have people join us as well, right? Is whether or not they have a life science background, they're very excited by, trying to help companies discover life-saving drugs, etc., while still working on like really interesting and hard technical problems.
Yeah, I have 9 years of. I made the switch 9 years ago, coming from physics and engineering. I loved it, keep loving it, and I think the switch was easy back then, at least. My co-founder is a biologist. She's been a biologist ever since. And there's many years of experience in working in labs and then biotech.
Thanks everyone. So actually this is going to be our final call for a last question, I suppose. We have 5 more minutes. Otherwise this brings our panel to a close. And I'd like to invite you all to share any final thoughts you'd like to share with our attendees.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's broad.
Yeah. Thanks for having us. I guess like I hope if
Listening.
yeah, hopefully this was helpful. And like if the bulk of the audience is people thinking about starting stuff, I just hope that you do. Is like I just think there's so much opportunity in the space, and the like traditional model of like you are an experienced prof and veteran in pharma, and then you start a company, and is just fundamentally like outdated. And so I do hope that there's like more and more people like joining early stage companies and starting companies because of like a belief that something could be better in biotech.
Thanks for being part of the panel. And final plug for our event on the 24th. And also we have links to the resource page for this event as well, which also goes deeper into all the jargon associated with data compliance.
Awesome. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good one.
All right.